than anybody else. What else? I'm waiting. What else do they have that any of us would desire? Amos Wilson said, in order for a minority, i.e. white people, in order for a global minority to rule over a global majority, that global minority must turn the world upside down. It must invert our understanding and our view of everything. Meaning that the people who are most criminal must be seen as the most innocent, the most law-abiding, whereas the people who are the number one victims of crime must be seen as the criminals. He said the people who are most violent in the world must be seen as the peace givers, as the civilizers, as the settlers, whereas the people who are the biggest victims of violence must be seen as the predators, as the super predators, as the most violent. People who are most immoral, the people who lack any level of morality, must be viewed as the people who determine and define what morality is and impose morality on the world, as the law bringers, as the lawgivers, where the people who are the victims of immorality must be seen as the hoes, the pimps, the drug dealers. And it goes on in every sector. The people who are most dishonest must be seen as the most truthful, whereas the people who dwell in truth and justice must be seen as the liars, the pimps, the drugs, the hustlers. And if you do not invert this vision, if you do not invert people's understanding, if you do not indoctrinate people in such a way, the majority will overwhelm and displace the minority. Even the founding fathers would understood this. That's why enslavers will talk about freedom and human equality. All men are created equal, while you have, literally, you have the so-called founding fathers. I call them the founding rapists, the founding pedophiles, the founding murderers. But the founding father works too. The people you call fathers are the murderers, and the people who are accused and locked up for murder are often the true fathers of civilization. And this inverted understanding and this inverted vision must be preserved. Nothing threatens this system more than reality and truth. Nothing more so than understanding. Because they don't have enough bullets or bombs or submarines or aircraft carriers to subdue the world. So they have to depend on a large portion of the world subduing itself. And then the few of us who do not fall for the okie doke, they have more than enough bullets for us because they can employ the people who fall for the okie doke to police the rest of us. So when we talk about representation, you're talking about a society that's based on an inverted vision, on an upside down world. You want representation within an upside down, within a lie. You basically are begging for the system to tell the same lies about us that it tells about itself. But let's go into this young black woman, Paris Page. 5 reasons why representation matters. And these lists are all over. These lists are all over. And these articles, there's so many of them. But this is just one I picked because I wanted something, because even white folks are talking about representation now. They're pro-representation. So she says, number one, everyone should have characters or image they can relate to. It's part of who we are and how we understand ourselves. Now, she's right. When you see something that looks like you, you relate to it. All animal species do it. I have a dog. I walk my dog, and there could be another dog walking. When dogs see people, they respond one way. When they see other dogs, they respond another way. When they see a reflection of who they are, they recognize it. Primates do it especially. But other mammals, species, when they see other animals, when we see ourselves. But she said in that, first on the list, everyone should have characters or image they can relate to. And then she said it's part of who we are and how we understand ourselves. So, the whole representation matters. It's not us representing ourselves, but us being represented by someone else. So if Walt Disney is the one giving us the representation, they're also the ones giving us the understanding of ourselves. They will show us an image saying, hey, look at the Black Panther. Look at these powerful Africans. Look at these beautiful Africans. Look at these technological Africans. Look at these assertive Africans. And what do they do with all that power, technology, assertiveness? They go and offer it up willingly to a racist, disrespectful UN. They walk and say, go rewatch. I'm sure it's on YouTube by now. Go rewatch the end credit scene. The Black Panther literally walks up and says, we have all this hidden technology. We're ready to open ourselves to the world. And they didn't go to other African countries. They didn't say, let's have an African conference. They didn't go to the hood. They went to the hood to set up a charity, but like I said, charity. Bill and Melinda Gates set up charities in the hood. John D. Rockefeller set up charities. Hitler donated to charity. And if you understand the whole charity hustle, they have this thing called evaluations that must be done by learned scholars and statisticians. So what you give is not important, because often what is given, you have to measure the outcomes of what is given. But we'll talk about the not-for-profit industrial complex another time. So anyway, when we see ourselves, Walt Disney, multinational corporations represent us. Thus, multinational corporations represent us. Thus, they can embrace our culture. Yes, we are told to embrace ourselves, but it would be a lot more comforting to see ourselves in more character portrayals that reflect every culture. Representation within an alien culture helps you embrace your culture. No, it doesn't help you embrace a culture. But again, it helps you embrace the alien's culture. I mean, this doesn't even make sense. And the image she uses for this, I'll share this link, is the black stormtrooper, the black guy, and I like this guy. He's a great actor. But they show this black dude dressed up like a stormtrooper in the Star Wars movie. And then they show this little black kid dressed up like a stormtrooper. And do you know where the stormtroopers come from? Look up Nazi stormtroopers. So you literally have a black man dressed up as a fictional representation of Nazis. And then a bunch of little black kids go up and dress up, and I'm a stormtrooper. When the stormtrooper was the Luftwaffe, the highest ranking shock troop, because they had this system of war called the Blitzkrieg. And it's called lightning war, where the Nazis had developed this technology for subduing populations, where they just come with overwhelming force. First they bomb you, then they send in the heavy artillery, and then the tanks, and then they come with the stormtroopers, come in and kill off anybody that escaped the bombing and strafing runs and the artillery shells. That's what the stormtroopers are in history. Now black people see a black stormtrooper, and we got our kids running around talking about they want to be stormtroopers. And then there's number 3. There are stories that are missing. That's number 3. Number 1, everyone should see characters, images, helps to embrace our cultures, and there are stories that are missing. Without representation of all genders, races, sexes, sexuality, body types, there are stories that are missing. Without equal representation, people will feel like they aren't seen or heard. But here's the thing, the white story is missing. When you look at white media, when you look at white history, when you look at white representation, like Common is representing black folks in this movie called Hunter Killer. And the whole movie is a damn lie. It is pro-Pentagon, pro-war, pro-American propaganda. So we're literally saying we're being left out of a lie. So we want to be included in the lie. And it's a difference between being included in a lie and being told the truth. So there's stories that are missing, yes. And even white folks' stories are missing because nobody's story is being told. Then it says, number 4, it's realistic. In the media, representation can often be misinterpreted, and it's more realistic to see characters and people who embody us. You know, when I was a kid, and I used to read comics, I was a big-time Marvel fan. I used to read Justice League and a few DC titles, but Marvel was my thing, and the mutants were my thing. And they had, a fair share of black mutants, prominent black mutants, even for a long time, and before all this representation rhetoric was even popular, before social media. Storm, in the 80s and 90s, took over control. I mean, the X-Men were not only led by a black character, but a black female character. Well ahead of his time. Y'all sure love Stan Lee. Maybe he's earned some of that love. But I always thought to myself, mutants is basically randomly occurring mutation. And if it's just randomly occurring in population, then the majority, I always thought to myself, even as a kid, the majority of the mutants should be Asian, because the majority of the people in the world are Asian. And there were a few, there was like a Silver Samurai, he was a mutant, and Hishiro, the Japanese mutant. And there was like a communist super team, like the Russian Bear and whatever. There were a few Asian mutants, but the vast majority of mutants were white. So that was unrealistic to me, because I always thought if you have randomly occurring mutation, the majority of the mutants should be Asian, after that of African descent, and so on and so forth. But that's realistic. But again, you want realism in a fantasy world. Western media is nothing but lies. And I'm not just talking about the movies and the science fiction. I'm talking about the news. I'm talking about the history books. I'm talking about academia. They lie. They lie on themselves, and we expect them to be honest and show an accurate representation of us when they don't even give us an accurate representation of themselves. And then number 5, because everyone deserves to see themselves in their heroes. It teaches self-love, and it feels damn good to see and read about someone like you. This is true. I can't even lie. When I was a kid, I really liked Luke Cage. They used to call him Power Man. We didn't call him Luke Cage, but he was Power Man. And not only was Luke Cage, he was an ex-prisoner, and he spoke ghetto slang, and he didn't go off and fight aliens. He stayed in the community. I really liked the Power Man comics, except when they hooked him up with Power Fist. They messed up his character. Then they married him off to some white woman, But early in the Luke Cage, he would fight these other black sinister dudes, and he, talk about. So I really liked Power Man. I liked the Black Panther, because the Black Panther of the comic book is not the Black Panther of the movie. The Black Panther of the movie, the Black Panther of the comic book, if you read the comic books back in the 80s and 90s, he actually got kicked out of the Avengers because the Avengers found out that he did not support the Avengers. He only joined the Avengers because he thought that the Avengers were a threat to African sovereignty, because they operated outside of the border. So he literally joined the Avengers to collect intelligence and to spy on them. And the nation of Wakanda had these large underwater war machines all around the coast of the United States, because he knew that the United States was an imperial power, and he did not trust the United States at all. So he set up these war machines so that at any moment they could come up to the surface and destroy all the major cities in America. The Black Panther was a black militant in the comics. I don't know where he is now, but if you go back and read the comics from the 90s, the mid-90s to the early 2000s, I really loved seeing those heroes. But the problem is, if you base your self-love, if my self-love, now, even though I greatly enjoyed those comics, I loved those stories, and how the Panther was so cold-blooded, and Panther used to have this bodyguard. This guy was like 10 feet tall, because generally the Panther would wear suits. He didn't wear his vibranium costume. So he had an entourage and his bodyguard, and his bodyguard, he had the Dora Milaje, but there was this giant guy who wore a traditional African garb. He would wear carry this technological spear. He was like 8 feet tall, and he just hated white folks. And Black Panther was always having to tell him to fall back and chill. It was just a wonderful run of those comics. But anyway, I never rooted my self-love in those comics, because if your self-love is based on representation in your oppressor's media, not only can they invoke that self-love, they can, if they give it, they can take it away. So we shouldn't give them enough power to plead to them to offer us representation. It's to also give them power over us. We should be immune and indifferent to their media and to our representation in their media. And I know we're not there, but that should be the goal we strive for. And so representation does matter, but not in the positive sense that we believe. So I made a list to tell you what really happens when black people are represented in white media. Number one, representation matters, but let me tell you how it matters, how it impacts us. Number one, representation pacifies us. Now, this is my list of what representation truly does. Representation pacifies us. It gives us a false image of inclusion and progress. Representation, you turn on, I remember when I used to watch The Cosby Show, my grandmother, I was raised by my grandmother because my father was in federal and state penitentiaries, and my mother was addicted to drugs. So my grandmother had to step up, and I knew lots of people, if there was a Jesus, I would thank him for grandparents. Grandparents held it down in the 80s during the so-called crack epidemic and mass incarceration. My family is just like a textbook of all white, hostile redlining, all of that. My great-grandparents owned their homes, and my grandparents lived in the housing project. Because black folks went from home ownership to projects, and then we got more in subprime, or the pre-subprime era. We got more homes, and now many of us are moving back into substandard housing or rental or public housing. The same cycle. We act like like I said, I don't know why we think we're the first population of black people to be gentrified. But anyway, it pacifies us, because even though we were under the boot of oppression, every night we turn on the TV and we see Bill Cosby doing that old herky-jerky, goofy-ass dance in the opening credit of The Cosby Show. And Cosby never talked about crack. Cosby didn't even deal with racism. There was one episode where Theo had a joint in his pocket, and the joint wasn't even his. It was his friend stuck it into his pocket. And we see black lawyers and black doctors, and then Bill Cosby, after the real Bill Cosby, showing us a black doctor and black lawyer when he got his doctorate, because he is a doctor in physical education, whatever that means, but he has honorary doctorates. But then he comes and tells us, oh, we can be anything we want to be. When I got rats and black moles at my grade school, and I got to literally walk through a minefield of discarded needles and gang shootouts, but I can be anything I want to be, you're lying. So it pacified me with delusions and false promises. You know, Bill Cosby lived in Brooklyn Heights in the 80s. Do you know what was going on in Brooklyn in the 80s? He could have put that family in Strivers Row in Harlem. He could have put that family in Bushwick. Hell, anywhere up and down Eastern Parkway. But Brooklyn Heights, over at 7th Avenue, that was the white affluent area. They lived in a predominantly white community. In the historic New York City, when there were even a lot of prominent black, like I said, they could have put him in Strivers Row, even in Staten Island, out in Sag Harbor. There were many historical black communities of affluent black folks. Bill Cosby pacified. And positive images tend to pacify us. Delusions of inclusion. So representation pacifies. Use that hashtag. Also, representation distorts. You see all these NBA players and these rappers, you think black people got banked. There are white people that think that black people are rich. And not even just white. I had a young Sudanese refugee who worked for me. And she said when she was in Sudan, they thought every black person was Oprah, living like Oprah and Michael Jordan. So when you got these black people in the media, it gives a distortion. Either you're a criminal, either you're in the drugs, you're living in abject poverty, or you're Michael Jordan. And it doesn't show the masses of the black proletariat, the black working class. It's like when I grew up in the project, 90% of the black people in the project were not in gangs, didn't sell drugs or anything, but my community was called drug infested and gang infested. And if you know anything about community dynamics and demographics, you can have a community of 10,000 people, and it can take, you can have 10 people. 1% of that population can mark that whole neighborhood. My housing project literally had hundreds of units, and maybe there were 4 to 5 units where there was ongoing criminal activity, and they treated us all like criminals. Or you can have the impression that all black people are doing, it's all good. We're in a post-racial society. Look at Obama. So it distorts us. Because when they show us in the media as being either all good or all bad, you're either some triumphant black striving hero. What's that stupid movie, Hidden Figures? They should have called that movie Hidden Niggas, because they hid the niggas in the basement. Not Hidden Figures. The figures weren't hidden. The figures were out front. It was the black folks that were hidden. But whatever. So we're all this, you're either, Boots Riley said, women could either be saints, hoes, or skeezers. There was no balance. So representation distorts. Representation pacifies. Representation manipulates. They can literally use their media. Bobby E. Wright said, in most countries, when there is an uprising, when there is a rebellion, the first thing they do is shut down the universities. He said in America, when black people rebel, the first thing they do is hand out scholarships, because they know having us represented in their institutions also prevents radicalism. You look at the HBCUs, and all these black people love HBCUs, when HBCUs are like, again, more crass language, hide your kids, hide your wife, because I'm going to say it, nigger factories. Gil Scott-Heron wrote a whole book, The Negro Colleges. Dale Jones says, I don't want no more Negroes. So stop sending them to the Negro colleges to be trained up to be Negroes, historically. And when you look at the black people, because a lot of people come to me and be like, oh, Kwame Ture went to a HBCU. Yes, and when he wanted to fight for the people, he had to leave campus. The school didn't support him in his resistance. And they only circle back and embrace them when they become popular in history. But when they were in the midst of the struggle, so representation manipulates. They can get black people to read B.S. Skinner. They say they can have us all be beggars, they can make us criminals, or they can make us scholars. By distorting the images, by controlling the representation and controlling our access and presence in their institution. Representation exploits. Hip-hop. Do I need to say more? The white man gets paid off of all of that. When they bring us into their media, into their apparatus, it's open. They get to sell our products all over the world. You got racist neo-Nazis in Russia rapping, using rap music, using black culture, using black movements, breakdancing to promote neo-Nazism. So it exploits our culture when we beg to get in and be shown in their media. And finally, representation distracts. I know black brothers in my own family. They can't tell you nothing about no history, nothing about any international politics. They can't tell you about any of the struggles in the community or even struggles abroad. But they can tell you every single sports statistic. They can tell you the draft, who's going to get traded to what. They can tell you the income and salary and how many units Jay-Z moved on his last album. They hold all this stupid knowledge that is of no use to any of us. So representation distracts. It fills our head up and got us debating whether or not celebrating and fight with Nazis instead of fighting with Nazis and fighting with fascists and fighting with capitalists to preserve the world's ecosystem. For our human dignity, for our representation, we fighting over a damn Disney mermaid. Representation distracts. So yeah, it matters. Why does representation matter? It matters because it has the great potential to pacify us, to distort our understandings, to manipulate us, exploit us, and distract us. And what really matters, revolution matters, Pan-African matters, liberation matters. And I don't want to spoil your fun. I don't have a daughter, so my sons, I've never seen the Little Mermaid movie. My sons probably are not into that. They're like regular old little smelly little boys, toy guns and trucks. They're gender conforming little boys. So I don't know, but if my son, my younger son at least, was like, I want to see this mermaid, I'd take him to see the damn mermaid. I took him to see the Black Panther. They love the Black Panther. But what you have to understand about this whole representation nonsense, Dr. Bobby E. Wright said, our education comes from our home. When we're under oppression, systemic societal oppression, then we still need that underground railroad. That underground railroad of analysis, of teaching and understanding. We black children need to be given the armor, the psychological, intellectual armor. Go get that book Without Sanctuary and show them the lynching photos. Don't tell, I don't want to see these images. Black children need to know we are in a hostile climate. The police are there to hurt you. They are not there to enforce the law. They enforce the status quo. So when black folks, when you look at a white person on TV, or like Karis once said in, 89, when you watch television, just keep saying, they're lying to me, they're lying to me. And you can enjoy it. You can play the video games. It's like my sons were over at Dita's house, and they were playing the video games. And Dita's wife came out and was like, yo, look at how they showing these reprehensible images of women. So yeah, play the game, but no, but you know, the way they represent women in these video games, the man comes out in armor and the woman comes out in a metal thong. And the woman's on the battlefield, the man's on the battlefield in these combat boots, and the woman's wearing stiletto high heels on the battlefield. The women are objectified in video games. Play the video games, but understand. Enjoy the Black Panther, enjoy the Black Mermaid, but have an understanding. I can't be distracted by this. This is not where the battlefield is. And my children get representation. They have their representation. Kwame Nkrumah. Fred Hampton, Chairman Fred Hampton. They got all the representation they need. And if your children don't have a steady diet of Fred Hampton, right now my son has a poster of Wise Intelligent on his wall. A poor righteous teacher. So don't ask Disney, CBS, Fox. Your representation is whatever access, whenever you have access to black children. You provide that representation. Everything else is filler. Everything else, their mainstream media should be our background noise. Our mainstream media is our bookshelves. Go out and collect these tapes. Go to YouTube and get the Dr. John Henry Clark and Marimba Ani and Francis Cress Welsing. So yes, our children do need media, and teach black children media analysis. Teach them about the pathology of our oppressors. Because we know, if they do get full-on representation, what are they going to do? Start acting like white men. You want equality with white men? You want to be equal with white men? Because they got the best representation. You want a black Superman. Y'all want a black James Bond. So representation is actual neo-tokenism, and I'm going to close with this. And neo-tokenism, it used to be tokenism of the class was just there would be a black person on the surface. There would be a black person up front. You know, but neo-tokenism is like, there's like, black people got hip to tokenism. They give a black man a title with no power. They give a black woman a position up front of the company. She sit up front at the reception desk. It's like, oh, she's a token. Black people got hip to that. So then the white man figured out, I don't just need to have her up front. I don't just need to have a black spokesperson. I can have a black CEO. I can have a black general in my military. I can have a black president. I can have a black Supreme Court justice. And actually not just have black people be physically present, but give black people a power and authority within the system, because those black people have been thoroughly indoctrinated and then fully embraced our value system and fully support our agenda. So I can let black people go as far and as deep into my system as I want, and it won't be any material changes for the condition of black people or the status of black people, because the black people we trained up and we trust ourselves enough and we trust our system of indoctrination enough. So that's neo-tokenism. You ain't just a token, you are a cog in the machine. So, it used to be, when a white president was elected, he'd have a token position on his cabinet. They get a black man or a black woman to be the undersecretary of, toe jam. The assistant chairwoman of, nose picking. They give a black son, like You know who's doing old school tokenism? Trump. Trump made Omarosa like the sub-secretary of media affair outreach. Just a made-up title so he could have a black woman standing in the pictures. Now that's old school tokenism. New school tokenism is to make a black man or a black woman attorney general and set them loose with all power and authority of attorney general. And guess what? They locking up black folks and maintaining mass incarceration just as aggressively as the white one did. That's neo-tokenism. You ain't just on the surface. You fully embedded all the way to the core, and yet we got the same outcomes as when we were just on the surface. Representation is a call for neo-tokenism. It used to be they just would have a black actor. Now they got black writers, black producers, black directors, and even black movie studios showing the same degenerate, backwards ass, empty brain nonsense. You're still not getting revolutionary media when it used to just be a black actor. Neo-tokenism means that the tokenism goes on. We're not just on the surface. We're at the core of the system, and we still haven't learned to act in our best interest. So, all that being said, Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio, please subscribe to the YouTube page. Share it, especially share it on Facebook, because I am no longer, ever going to broadcast on YouTube, on Facebook again. I'm about to part ways with Facebook, so get up with me, man. Follow me on Twitter.